Autumn stood on the front steps of her childhood home, suitcase in hand and heart pounding, as a cold wind carried the echo of her late father's booming laughter. 5 years had passed since she'd stormed out after their bitter argument. 5 years spent building a reputation in Chicago real estate that proved she could thrive without family ties. Yet here she was, drawn back by the news of his sudden passing and the whispered promise of an inheritance. As the door creaked open, Autumn's eyes took in the ultramodern chrome and glass foyer that her stepmother, Donna, had installed, every trace of her father's warm leather and maple accents erased. Stepping inside felt both foreign and familiar, across the polished marble floor. Her stepsister Bethany gave a tight nod of acknowledgement, while her stepbrother Travis lounged in an armchair, scrolling on his phone. Autumn's suitcase suddenly felt heavier before she could gather her composure. Donna emerged from the living room, her painted smile slipping into shock. "Autumn," she said, voice brittle, "we tried reaching you." Autumn offered a curt nod. "I wouldn't miss Dad's will reading." Donna's lips pursed. "Of course, we'll make up the guest room." Autumn set her gaze on the white leather sofa where Donna sat, flanked by old family friends. She drew in a steadying breath. Tonight, she would reclaim not only her father's legacy, but the respect she'd earned on 2 continents. And if her stepfamily thought excluding her from the inheritance meant victory, they hadn't counted on her father's final, 3-step-ahead move. Autumn awoke the next morning in the cold guest room, her heart still pounding from last night's tense encounter in the foyer. She dressed quickly and slipped outside to the screened porch, where the June air carried the soft scent of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass. As she sank into a worn Adirondack chair, the image of her father's warm smile flickered through her mind, mingling with the chill of betrayal she felt toward Donna and her siblings. It was then that Hazel Autumn's childhood friend, who had stayed in Maplewood to run her family's hardware store, emerged from the shadow of the old oak tree, cradling 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "They've been furious since you arrived," Hazel said, offering Autumn a mug. "Donna's already in talks with developers about selling that Riverside parcel." Autumn's throat tightened. "They never bothered to tell me Dad's health declined last year." "Did they?" Hazel shook her head. "Not a word. They cleared everything out of your father's office just last week, said it was for estate maintenance. But I noticed the desk drawers had been emptied too." A spark of determination lit in Autumn's chest. "I need to see that office." Back inside, Autumn slipped through the silent hallways, memories echoing in every polished chrome corner. She remembered the loose floorboard in the hallway outside her father's study, his secret hiding place. Kneeling, she pried it open and found a small, tarnished key tied to a scrap of blue painter's tape. Her pulse quickened as she crept to the locked study door and inserted the key into the weathered brass lock. It turned with a quiet click. Inside, the room had been stripped almost bare, no leather-bound ledgers, no framed photos, nothing but a single painting of a misty mountain stream. Autumn lifted the canvas from its hook. Taped to the back was a thick envelope addressed in her father's flowing script, "Autumn, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Love, Dad." She sank into the leather armchair and tore open the envelope. Inside lay a handwritten letter dated 3 months earlier, along with instructions to retrieve a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key, her father noted, was taped behind that very painting. He warned her that Donna had no idea of this arrangement, and that she must act swiftly to secure what truly belonged to her. Heart pounding, Autumn rushed back to her car and drove the 2 miles into town, rain-slick streets gleaming in the morning light. At the bank, she signed in under her maiden name, the one Donna never bothered to learn, and retrieved box number 247. Inside, snug in velvet lining, were bundles of property deeds, trust documents, and a USB drive labeled Simply Watch. Back at the local coffee shop, Autumn plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen flickered to life with her father's familiar face. Gaunt, but resolute. "Autumn," he began, "if you're seeing this, then my plan worked. I knew Donna would swoop in and rewrite my will. So I transferred ownership of our most important properties directly to you through a series of trusts and transfers over the past 3 years. The Riverside land, the downtown commercial block, Maple Street apartments, all legally in your name. Donna doesn't know, and she won't believe it until you show her the county recorder's stamps." He paused, eyes glistening. "You may think I abandoned you when you left for Chicago, but I never stopped planning for your future. Remember our motto, patience and planning always win in the end. Meet Frank Mason, he'll guide you through the details. I love you. Son, Autumn." Tears blurred Autumn's vision as she replayed the message. All those years of silent pride in her magazine features, threaded into her father's office shelves, had not been in vain. She gathered the deeds and documents into her briefcase. The scales had tipped. The inheritance was already hers. That afternoon, Autumn strode back to the lawyer's midtown office, deeds in hand and resolve in her heart. For the first time in years, she felt the true weight of her father's legacy not in cold chrome or gleaming glass, but in every acre of land he loved and every dream he had for Maplewood's future. The moment had come to turn the tables completely. "50 yards from the wrought iron gate." Autumn paused, suitcase in hand, and felt the weight of every mile she had traveled and every year she had spent away pressed down on her shoulders. The morning sun glinted off the rain-speckled pavement, and the sweet tang of honeysuckle mingled with the distant hum of Maplewood's church bells. It was a Tuesday, she recalled with a shiver. The very day 5 years ago, when a blazing argument had shattered her childhood and sent her boarding a red-eye to Chicago without a backward glance. Now, as taxi tires crunched over the gravel driveway, she realized how small the Victorian facade looked in daylight, its turrets and gables diminished from the grand memories that once inflated their splendor. Inside, the familiar aroma of cedar and old leather had given way to an antiseptic crispness. Her stepmother, Donna, had insisted on a full makeover: polished chrome banisters, pale marble floors, and airy glass panels that reflected more glare than warmth. Autumn's fingers brushed the banister as she climbed the wide oak steps, surprising herself with a pang of nostalgia for the scuffed banisters she once knew. Each step creaked under her weight, a reminder that some things like that creaking stair couldn't be modernized away. In the foyer, Bethany hovered by a mid-century modern console table, arms folded, her sculpted bob and tailored blazer echoing Donna's taste. Across from her, Travis lounged in a sleek leather armchair, eyes glued to a tablet. Autumn set down her case, her heart twisting at the tableau. Neither of them moved to help. "Welcome home," Bethany said coolly, voice careful. "If you're here for Dad's funeral arrangements, the service is tomorrow at 2. No warmth, just formality." Autumn managed a tight nod. "I'll be there." Donna appeared then, drifting forward with the grace of someone accustomed to command. Her auburn hair was pulled into a smooth chignon, and her lipstick matched the polished veneer of the living room's glass coffee table. "Autumn," she said, voice a practiced blend of sympathy and steel. "We've prepared your guest suite. It's on the second floor, overlooking the garden." Autumn's throat tightened. She remembered that garden, her mother's rose bushes, the swing set built by her father's own hands, the old oak where she had carved her initials as a child. Donna led the way down a long hallway, past walls lined with abstract art and recessed lighting. Autumn's footsteps echoed where once her own laughter had filled the corridors. In the guest room, she unpacked only a small toiletries bag. Her real luggage remained by the door. She crossed to the window and looked out over the backyard, where the old swing had been replaced by a metal bench, incongruous with its surroundings. A robin hopped along the edge of a mulch bed, and Autumn watched it, her heart lurching with a mixture of grief and determination. She had come back not to bow her head, but to claim what was rightfully hers and to honor a father's memory hewn into every brick of this house. That evening, after the funeral service, the rain came in breezy April gusts that rattled the windows but couldn't rinse away the cold tension inside. Autumn stood by the mantel where her father's portrait once hung. Donna's hand had replaced it with a sleek mirror framed in brushed steel. Autumn pressed her palm to the glossy surface, the reflection fragmented by distant lightning flashes. She thought of the explosive argument that had driven her away, her refusal to endorse Donna's upscale condominium plan for the Riverside property, and her belief that real estate should serve families, not just investors. Her father had listened, but in the end sided with Donna, hurt and angry. Autumn had chosen self-reliance over reconciliation. Now, return felt less like homecoming and more like a reckoning. When she finally turned from the mirror, Donna was standing in the doorway, clutching a folder. "Before we all disperse," she said, "Harold will meet you here tomorrow morning to discuss the will." Autumn's lip curled. "I'll see him," she replied quietly. Donna's eyes flicked with something unreadable: surprise, annoyance, maybe fear. Autumn allowed herself a small, steadying breath. Beneath the veneer of this ultramodern house lay secrets waiting to be uncovered: old oak keys hidden beneath floorboards, safety deposit box instructions tucked behind a painting, and a father's final plan laid out in his own hand. As Autumn climbed the stairs, she let her suitcase trail behind, its wheels humming softly over the hardwood floor. 5 years had taught her patience and planning. Tomorrow, she vowed, would be the first day of setting things right, and this time, she would not be 3 steps behind her father, she would be exactly where she was meant to stand by his side, carrying forward the legacy they once built together. Autumn's pulse thundered in her ears as she stepped into Henry Stevenson's law office that afternoon. The reception area polished oak floors. Collegiate pennants on the walls felt both familiar and alien after 5 years away. She carried a slim portfolio of documents tucked under her arm, her charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection, and a resolve that had crystallized into steel over the past 24 hours. When Autumn entered the conference room, the tension snapped into focus. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Donna, her auburn hair pulled into a pristine chignon, and her posture every bit the commanding widow. To her right, Bethany checked her perfectly manicured nails, and on her left, Travis slouched in a leather armchair, scrolling on his phone. A few local dignitaries and family friends, old-timers who knew Autumn as a child, hovered politely, their expressions caught halfway between curiosity and embarrassment. Henry Stevenson rose and offered Autumn a thin, leather-bound chair. "Miss Mercer," he began, using her married name. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I'm here for the will reading," Autumn replied, voice steady. She laid her portfolio on the table with a soft thud. "I received my father's official notification yesterday." Henry cleared his throat. "Of course, we can begin." He opened a manila folder and produced the formal will. Autumn watched as he read the preamble: leave to my devoted wife Donna, the family home on Maple Avenue, and a cash sum of $2 million to my stepdaughter, Bethany, $1 million to my stepson, Travis, another $1 million, and so on. Donna nodded, as though each bequest were precisely what she'd expected, her expression a practiced mask of mourning. Then Henry reached the key line as to my business interests. Harrison Properties and all associated assets. I leave to my son, Maxwell. His voice faltered. Autumn had anticipated this moment. She rose and opened her portfolio, revealing crisp, stamped property deeds, one by one. She slid them onto the table: the Riverside Development parcel, the downtown commercial block, the Maple Street apartment complexes, plus a dozen more key holdings. Each deed bore the county recorder's seal and Autumn's name printed in bold. Miss Mercer Henry's gaze flicked between the will and the deeds. Autumn inhaled slowly. "These deeds aren't part of the estate. My father legally transferred ownership of every single one to me over the past 3 years, through a series of trusts and gift transfers. These properties have been in my name since the dates stamped here." She tapped the Riverside deed dated April 12, 2022, and the apartment transfer November 3, 2023. "They're not included in the will because they aren't his to bequeath." A ripple of shock passed through the room. Donna's perfectly arched eyebrows shot upward, and Bethany dropped her phone onto the table with a jarring click. Travis looked up, wide-eyed, as though he'd just been caught in mid-swipe. Donna regained her composure first. "This is impossible," she said, voice pitched just above calm. "My husband signed his will here 2 years ago, in this very room, with you present. He never mentioned transferring any major assets." Henry's face paled. He rifled through Autumn's deeds with trembling fingers. "Miss Mercer," he began, "these documents appear valid. The signatures, the notary stamps, they all check out. If your father executed these transfers while alive, they would have extinguished his ownership interest before his passing." Bethany sprang to her feet. "You can't just waltz back after 5 years and claim everything. We've been running the company in his absence." Her voice cracked on the last word. Autumn met her stepsister's glare without flinching. "I'm claiming what's already mine. Legally and irrevocably," she said. "My father wanted these assets protected from being sold off piecemeal. He trusted me to carry on his vision for Maplewood." Travis closed his tablet and pushed himself upright. "What about Harrison Properties itself? The will says you get the company." "Everything that made Harrison Properties valuable, the properties are already in my name," Autumn replied. "The corporate entity is essentially a shell. I also received documents yesterday from Frank Mason, my father's longtime partner, confirming the formation of Harrison Legacy Holdings, with me as sole owner." Donna's perfectly painted lips trembled. This can't stand. I refuse to believe he would have done it without telling me." Autumn smiled, a gentle but unyielding curve. "He did tell you. He recorded it all." She tapped the edge of her laptop. "On this drive are videos where he explains every decision why he transferred assets to me, his concerns about the company's direction under new management, and his absolute trust in me to uphold our family legacy." At that, Donna's composure cracked. A single tear escaped down her cheek before she hastily wiped it away. The local guests exchanged awkward glances, and Henry closed the will with a soft snap. "It seems," Henry said in a low voice, that the estate holds nothing of value beyond the home and smaller accounts specified. Legally, these deeds stand apart from this proceeding. Autumn gathered her documents, her heart pounding with relief and vindication. She paused at the door and looked back at Donna, Bethany, and Travis. My father always said patience and planning win in the end. Thank you for reminding me why I learned those lessons so well. With that, Autumn walked out of the conference room, leaving a silence louder than any argument. Outside, the late afternoon sun glinted off the polished brass doorknob, just a reminder that, at long last, Autumn was exactly where she belonged. Autumn stood in the hushed conference room, the late afternoon sun slanting through Venetian blinds and casting striped shadows across the mahogany table. Across from her sat Donna, her stepmother, eyes narrowed into slits of disbelief, beside Donna. Bethany's cheeks were flushed, and Travis fingered the edge of his leather portfolio with trembling impatience. Autumn's own hands were steady as she laid one final stack of documents before them. Before we continue, Autumn began, voice calm but firm enough to carry to the farthest corner of the room. I'd like to present you with the true state of Harrison Properties. She tapped the top deed, dated nearly 3 years earlier. These aren't simply attachments to the estate. Dad transferred ownership of every major asset Riverside parcels, downtown commercial blocks, Maple Street apartments directly into my name through a series of irrevocable trusts. Donna's breath caught. That's absurd, she whispered. My husband would never exclude me or you. Autumn nodded. He knew you'd try to rewrite his will. That's why he established Harrison Legacy Holdings. It's a separate entity, formed last spring, with me as the sole owner and operational head. Harrison Properties, as you know it, is now a shell. Its assets have been preemptively assigned to Legacy Holdings. If you look here. She flipped through the trust agreements and recording stamp pages. You'll see the notarized transfers, all filed with the county recorder's office months ago. Bethany's face paled. She looked from Autumn to the paper, unable to find words. Travis's hand flew to his throat. Outside, a distant church bell chimed, a poignant reminder that justice had finally rung true. Donna rose abruptly, porcelain-skinned and rigid as a statue. This is a fraud, she accused, voice hollow. I'll have these deeds challenged in court. Autumn inclined her head respectfully. You're free to consult any counsel you wish, but the law is clear. Once my father executed those transfers, they were final. They weren't bequests in his will, they were outright gifts while he was living. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. These deeds don't pass through the estate, they transfer title immediately and irrevocably. A muffled gasp came from one of the family friends in the corner. Henry Stevenson, the aging attorney who had overseen the original will reading, rubbed his graying temples. I never realized these instruments existed, he stammered. Mr. Harrison must have kept them confidential to prevent undue influence. Autumn allowed a brief, wry smile. He trusted that I would honor his vision and protect his legacy, rather than watch it be dismantled. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a small USB drive. He even recorded a video message explaining every detail, his concern over quick sales strategies, his faith in my leadership, and his desire to see the Riverside project completed according to the community-centered plan we discussed years ago. At that, Donna's posture slumped. Bethany's voice, when it finally emerged, was small and uncertain. So, you've owned these properties for months. We've been negotiating and planning around assets that weren't even yours to sell. Autumn's expression softened. I understand this is difficult. But my father made these decisions deliberately, because he believed in what we could build together for Maplewood, for the families who live here. For a moment, the room was utterly still. Then Henry cleared his throat and closed the old will with a decisive snap. Legally, these transfers supersede the testamentary dispositions, he said. The estate, therefore, retains only those assets not previously conveyed, primarily the family home and smaller liquid funds. Autumn gathered her files. As she stood to leave, she looked at Donna, Bethany, and Travis, not with triumph, but with measured compassion. My father always said property endures, but it has to serve a purpose. I intend to fulfill his purpose. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify the truth. She stepped out into the hallway, her heart pounding but her shoulders unburdened. In the days to come, there would be legal challenges and community meetings, but the turning point had arrived. The assets were hers, the legacy secured. As Autumn closed the office door behind her, she felt her father's presence in that quiet victory and the promise of a future built on both his dreams and her determination. Autumn spent the week reviewing every line of her father's original Riverside master plan, determined to honor his vision of a development that served all Maplewood residents. On Thursday morning, she stood before the town council in the historic chamber, its tall windows overlooking Main Street, with the same pew-like benches where she'd once watched 4th of July parades as a child. The room was filled with familiar faces, longtime neighbors who remembered her father's kindness, local business owners who had greeted her ambitions 30 years ago, and concerned citizens drawn by newspaper headlines about a high-end rival proposal. She began by projecting a simple site map onto the screen: 120 acres of riverfront land, formerly vacant and neglected, now sectioned into 3 distinct zones. Phase 1, she explained, gesturing to the colored overlay, will dedicate 25 single-family homes at prices capped at 80% of the area median income, about $320,000, so local families, teachers, and first responders can truly afford to stay in Maplewood. A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. Autumn paused, letting the idea settle in. Phase 2 will include a community center with shared meeting rooms, a small business incubator for budding entrepreneurs, and a senior-friendly courtyard designed for afternoon card games and Tai Chi. Finally, the Riverwalk, complete with wheelchair-accessible ramps, will connect to existing trails, ensuring everyone can enjoy our town's natural beauty. At that point, Lawrence Blackwood, her father's longtime rival, stood to present his competing plan: luxury condo towers, upscale boutiques, and exclusive riverside dining. His slick presentation touted projected tax revenue and prestige branding for Maplewood, with condominiums priced starting at $850,000. Many council members exchanged polite nods, but Autumn noticed the furrowed brows among the retirees and small business owners in the audience, who worried such a plan would drive up property taxes and push longtime residents out. Autumn took a deep breath and returned to the podium. "My father always said that property endures when it serves the community," she reminded the council. "It isn't just a collection of buildings, it's a legacy. We can grow in a way that welcomes new families without losing the heart and history that make Maplewood special." She clicked to a slide showing photographs of potential residents: a young teacher in front of her classroom, a retired postal worker walking his dog along the riverbank, and a family of 4 tending a community garden plot. "These are our neighbors. They built this town. That simple." Heartfelt reminder drew a round of applause from the gallery. Councilwoman Irene Marshall, herself a retired school principal, leaned forward. "Miss Mercer, how will you ensure these affordable homes remain that way in 10 or 20 years? Autumn smiled and detailed the binding covenants her father had placed on those parcels, enforceable by a local nonprofit, the Harrison Community Trust, that she was helping establish with her half-sister, Alice Thornton. "These homes will never convert to market rate. Evergreen covenants guarantee their long-term affordability." Next, Autumn invited 2 residents from the initial pilot phase: Mr. Jennings, a 72-year-old Navy veteran, and Mrs. Patel, a special education aide, to share their experiences. Jennings spoke of being priced out of the Maple Street apartments he'd lived in for 40 years, and how Autumn's team had helped him move back into a renovated unit with a modest, fixed rent. Mrs. Patel described the relief of knowing her daughter could grow up in the same neighborhood where she taught. Their testimonies brought nods and even a few tears from council members. By the time the evening vote was called, the contrast between the 2 visions could not have been clearer. Blackwood's proposal offered short-term gains and luxury that most residents would never access. Autumn's plan promised lasting community benefits and honored her father's original intent. The council voted unanimously 7-0 in favor of the mixed-use, community-focused development. As the chamber erupted in applause, Autumn felt a swell of emotion. She caught Franklin Ross's eye in the back row, her father's old business partner, and saw his proud, teary nod. She stepped down from the podium to meet Hazel and Alice, who embraced her warmly. Outside, under the soft glow of street lamps, a small crowd cheered. Autumn realized in that moment that her father's vision was no longer just his. It had become a shared dream for all of Maplewood, secured by faith in community, compassion, and the promise that property truly endures when it serves the people it was meant to uplift. Autumn stood on the porch of her father's restored Maplewood home one crisp morning, sunlight filtering through the old oak's branches. At her side was Brittany, her stepsister, who handed Autumn a faded leather-bound journal filled with their father's reflections, an unexpected peace offering after months of tension. A few yards away, Alice, her half-sister from Colorado, laughed softly as she recounted childhood memories Autumn had never known. The 3 women shared stories over steaming mugs of coffee, each tale weaving them closer together and rebuilding the family bonds that had once been fractured. In the distance, The community center they'd championed together sprang to life, its new playground echoing with children's laughter. Autumn realized that, despite the hurt of past betrayals, her father's true legacy was more than land and buildings. It was the people who shaped them and the relationships that endured. Asterisk, asterisk, life lesson. Asterisk, asterisk, forgiveness and connection often hold more power than any legal document or inheritance. By opening your heart to understanding even when hurt runs deep, you can transform old wounds into stronger, more compassionate bonds that enrich your life and those around you. If Autumn's journey touched you, share your own story of reconciliation or community in the comments below. And if you'd like more uplifting true stories about legacy, family, and the power of forgiveness, please hit asterisk asterisk, subscribe asterisk asterisk, and join our community for new videos every week.